Jeremiah he was left there in the land, and he recorded Lamentations because he's there watching the city and the country burn down to the ground, right, during this war. Zechariah is a prophet that comes along in about 534. So you have that in 586, from 606 to 586. They go into captivity for 70 years. About 534 they come out, and Zechariah is now the prophet. He's one of the prophets. King Cyrus allows the Jews to come out of their homeland, and they come back through into the nation, into the land. And they start to rebuild under Ezra and Nehemiah and Zerubbabel, and you have Zechariah being the main prophet there. So he is a post-exilic prophet. He is a guy who prophesied well after the destruction of the first temple, and now they're going to rebuild the second temple. And so this is the context of Zechariah. All right. So there's already been judgment in the land 70 years earlier. They come out of Babylon, and now they're back into the land. And notice Zechariah prophesies about his second judgment. Okay. So if there were only two judgments, one in 586 and the other in AD 70, let me just ask, what do you suppose Zechariah 11 is about? He's a post-exilic prophet. It cannot be about the first judgment because that's already in his past. He's speaking about another judgment. What does that have to be?
AD 70.
AD 70. It has to be. He's a post-exilic prophet. So watch what he says. He says, "Open your doors, O Lebanon." Now Lebanon was in the land. It was in the northern part of the land of Israel. "That fire may devour your cedars. Wail, O cypress, for the cedar." So I'm reading from the New King James right now. So, "Wail, O cypress, for the cedar has fallen, because the mighty trees are ruined. Wail, O oaks of Bashan, for the thick forest has come down." Okay, this is Jewish judgment language. That's what this is. So the forests are going to be cut down during the invasion, and that's what Rome did. Verse 3, "There is a sound from the wailing shepherds, for their glory is in ruins. There is the sound of the roaring lions, for the pride of the Jordan is in ruins." Okay, so this is more judgment language. As Rome would come into the land, they would start devouring the entire land of Judea. Look at verse 4. "Thus says the Lord my God, feed the flock for the slaughter." You see that? That's judgment. What do you do before you slaughter the flock for meat? You fatten them up. So feed the flock for the slaughter. Now watch this. Keep your finger there, but turn all the way over to the book of James. I'm going to show you the New Testament connection to this. Go to James chapter 5. Now this is almost a direct quote. Almost. So instead of me proof texting, let's go back to James 5:1 and get the context. This is in the context of judgment in the last days of Israel. So James 5:1, he says, "Come now, you rich, weep and howl for your miseries that are coming upon you." Isn't that Zechariah 11? He tells them, "A fire may devour your cedars." He says, "There is a sound of wailing shepherds, for their glory is in ruins." That's Zechariah 11:3. James says, Weep and howl for the miseries that are coming upon you. For your riches are corrupted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver are corroded, and their corrosion will be a witness against you, and will eat your flesh like fire. And you have heaped up treasure in the last days. Verse 4, watch this. Indeed, the wages of the laborers who mowed your fields, which you kept back by fraud, cry out. So what the Jews were doing, they were ripping off, defrauding their own brethren. They were the rich. Come mow my field. Okay. They would harvest the field and they wouldn't pay them. Or they would pay them far less than what they agreed to. And James is addressing this because the Jews were the wicked generation. Here, this is what they were doing to one another. So this gives you some background as to what was going on in Israel's last days. They were defrauding one another. And notice it says he cries out, and the cries of the reapers, so James 5 and 4, the cries of the reapers have reached the ears of the Lord of Sabaoth. You have lived on the earth in pleasure and luxury. Now watch this, because here's Zechariah 11. You have fattened your hearts as in the day of slaughter. Do you see that? The day of slaughter was 80-70. They were fattening their hearts. Let's go back to Zechariah 11 and 4 and 5. So Zechariah 11 and 4. Thus says the Lord God, feed the flock for the slaughter. That's James 5 and 5. Whose owners slaughter them and feel no guilt. Okay, so what do you have? You have exactly what was found in James. The owners, the leaders, the rich people of the Jewish nation were taking advantage of the poor, of the Jews, of their own brethren. And they do not pity them. Look at verse 6. For I will no longer pity the inhabitants of the land, says the Lord, but indeed I will give everyone into his neighbor's hand. So I want you to underline, I will give everyone into his neighbor's hand. And then I want you, so when you make a note of that, I want you to go to Luke 21. I'm going to show you the fulfillment. Luke 21 and verse 16. All right, remember, he says, I will give everyone into his neighbor's hand during that time. Look at Luke 21:16. You will be betrayed even by parents and brothers, relatives and friends, and they will put some of you to death, and you will be hated by all for my name's sake. You see the connection? So Zechariah 11 and 6. I will give everyone into his neighbor's hand and into the hand of his king. That is Luke 21:16. We good?
So when you pointed that out to your pastor friend, like that was your secret weapon, and he...
No, I'm not there yet.
Oh, we're not done.
We're just looking at context.
Got it.
I'm not there yet. We're in, Tina, we're in Zechariah 11 right now. Now, I went through this with him just like I'm doing with you.
Mm-hmm.
We're not, verse 10 is going to be the secret weapon here.
Okay.
All right. So, I will give everyone into his neighbor's hand and into the hand of his king. I believe that is Caesar, because when you go to John 19:15, the Jews told Pilate, we have no king but Caesar. Remember that? So they're pledging allegiance to the king, it's the Caesar. So in the last days, God would feed the flock for the slaughter. He would fatten them up. He would give everyone into his neighbor's hand, into the hand of his king. That's a Roman king. And Rome's going to come into the land. Notice, they shall attack the land. Do you see the next statement there? So the New King James says, they shall attack the land. Rome's going to come in and attack the land, and I will not deliver them from their hand. That's the wars and rumors of wars of Matthew 24 and verse 6. The wars and rumors of wars. We have no king but Caesar. Okay, well fine. Your king is going to come in and attack the land because you rebel against him.
You know, for me, looking at just the footnotes in the Legacy Standard Bible, and I'm noticing like all the footnotes are pointing to other Old Testament prophecies, and to me that just seems like the translators, the people that put the chain reference together, are being dishonest and showing their bias, because the Old Testament, the New Testament is revealing what the Old Testament's talking about. And like you said, this is Zechariah after the destruction of the first temple. This is pointing to the second temple.
Yes.
And they're being very dishonest by not pointing this to like Matthew 24.
Right.
They're trying to erase that connection.
Yeah, they should be. So we got to be careful. And I love the Legacy Standard. I am using it every single day. But yeah, you know what? It's not perfect, and you have translator bias, and I think that's exactly what's going on. But that's okay, because we know that this is all referring to the New Testament era.
Yep.
Okay, so look at verse 7. So my secret weapon is in verse 10, but I wanted us to get the context. So verse 7, Zechariah 11 and 7, so I fed the flock for the slaughter. This is Jewish judgment language. In particular, the poor of the flock. And I took for myself 2 staffs. The one I called beauty, and the other I called bonds, and I fed the flock. Okay, so these 2 staffs represent the covenant. Now watch this. I dismissed the 3 shepherds in 1 month. I believe, I want you to make a note there of Daniel 7 and verse 8. I believe that is Daniel 7 and verse 8, although I'm just going to make a caveat there. I haven't figured it all out, but if you want to make a connection, remember the 3 horns that came up, was plucked up by the 1 horn speaking pompous words in Daniel 7 and verse 8? I think that's a connection. I don't know exactly how, but I think that's a connection. So I made in my Bible, I just made the note, Daniel 7 and verse 8. Because here he's dismissing 3 shepherds in 1 month. Well, my mind would go to Daniel 7 and 8. I know that there were 3 horns that were plucked up by the little horn. And I thought, well, there's a connection here. I don't know exactly, I don't know all the nuances, but I think that's a connection. Okay. Now notice he says at the end of verse 8, my soul loathed them, and their soul also abhorred me. I think this is the Jewish leaders. Somehow 3 of them within that time period were either killed or done away with somehow. Verse 9, then I said, I will not feed you. So this is famine. Did Jesus talk about famine in Matthew 24? He most certainly did. Let what is dying die. Ooh, wait a minute. You have the Lord telling them, hey, let what is dying die. I'm not going to heal you. I'm going to let you die. And what is perishing, perish. Oh my goodness. You mean, Lord, you're not going to be there for? No, I'm not going to be there. You've got a mortal wound, and I'm going to let you bleed to death. That's what he's saying here, basically. Watch this. Let those that are left eat each other's flesh. Do you see that? I don't know what the Legacy Standard says there.
Let those who remain consume one another's flesh.
Okay, consume one another's flesh, eat one another's flesh. There you have it. Okay, is that famine? Does that sound like the siege that occurred in 70 where Josephus says they ate each other's flesh? All right, here's my secret weapon. Here it is, verse 10. And I took my staff, beauty, and cut it in two. Now this is all symbolic language, but watch this. That I might break the covenant which I had made with all the peoples. Woo! Wait a minute. Put the brakes on here. God breaks his staff, the beautiful staff, that's the covenant, which I had made. I broke it in two, cut it in two, that I might break the covenant which I had made with all the peoples. All right. When did God break the covenant? In the day that they ate each other's flesh. Do you see the context? That's when AD 70, that's when God broke the old covenant. So I showed him this. I got the deer in the headlight pause on the telephone. I said, "Are you still there?" I know he's processing this, right? I know it. I'm like, the law did not end at the cross. Zechariah said it would end in the days that they ate each other's flesh. That would be the time when he broke the covenant with all the people. Bam! Very simple argument. Very, very, very simple.
That is so simple.
The Old Testament, I'm telling you folks, the Old Testament is so powerful. It is so powerful. We have to learn that Old Testament.
You know, and that's what, when I was a futurist, before, I left the church here, and when I came back, things make sense. Things didn't make sense then.
No, and that's why I had to change, Nancy.
It just
I looked
left
at the-
me with more questions.
Yes, I looked at the time statements and I could not explain them as a futurist. I realized, well, Jesus and the apostles, all of them, stated it would occur in that generation.
Well, and also,
How are we?
we only studied the New Testament.
Yeah,
We didn't, everybody I talked to said, we don't need that.
yeah, we threw away 3/4 of the Bible.
Yeah.
That's what we've done. So,
This right here is so powerful, and it's in the Old Testament.
it is powerful because it tells us when that law was broken. It wasn't broken at the cross. It could not have been.
It's just amazing how so much of like the evangelical churches that we came from it's pretty much the same thing, right? They focus on the destruction of the second temple, or the first temple, and then they just ignore really the destruction of the temple. They ignore the time text too when these prophets were writing this, because a lot of that was the future was the second temple. It wasn't but they push it out to this third temple. They just
Yes.
ignore it and they skip
Yes.
right over the second.
They-
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know.
So did that end the conversation with this guy then? or-
No, because he went on and he asked a bunch of other things. And I told him, I said, look, we believe that the Bible teaches. Oh, I showed him another thing. Sheila, let me show you what else I showed him
Yeah.
during this conversation.
And
So
then when you said address what I just brought to your attention.
They can. And so I want to leave people. So when I was a police officer working the streets, I recognized, I knew that you had, no matter how bad this guy is that you have in custody, you have to leave them. I'm not judge, jury, and executioner. I just enforce the law, and I take you to jail, and I write a police report and submit it to the DA. I have no bearing on whether the DA picks up the case, prosecutes you, none of that, okay? And I learned as a young police officer to leave people with a little bit of their dignity, okay? And so when you strip people of all their dignity, they become animals, all right? Because they have nothing left and they will fight back with every... So you put a person, let me digress. You put a person in a control hole, and I told this to the young officers. I trained dozens and dozens. For 2 years, 2 straight years, I had a new officer in my car. For 2 straight years, every day. I trained dozens for Porterville PD. And then for the state hospital. Lots and lots of police officers. I said, look, you put a person on the ground in a control hole and apply pain. The pain is to get compliance, okay? But there comes a point where if they're complying and you keep putting more and more pain on them, not only are you committing a crime, right? There will come a point to where they will no longer comply because they're in too much pain, okay? And they will fight like a rabid wolf to get out of your control hole because you're going to break their arm and it hurts too bad. So you always have to know when to throttle back. And so I tried to leave him with some dignity. Now I don't always do that. You know, I get to the point where, you know, I fight too, right? I start to take my stand hard. But I tried to leave him with some dignity. And I knew he couldn't answer, all right? So once I provided him with an answer, I would say, do you understand the power of the argument? Yes. Okay, next question. So I took him to 1 Corinthians, he said all that, 15 and verse, I think it's verse 46. Let's look at verse 46.
15 and 46.
15 and verse 46. So Paul gives us, regarding the resurrection of the dead, he gives us a template to follow. If we go back, I hate the proof text, I want to get the context. And it's hard to do this without going all the way back to verse 1. I don't want to do that. So he says in verse 42, so also the resurrection of the dead is the resurrection of the dead. The body, and it's the corporate body, it's not the physical individual body. The corporate body is sown in corruption. It is raised in incorruption. It is sown in dishonor. It is raised in glory. It is sown in weakness. It is raised in power. That's what was happening to them at the very time Paul wrote that the body of the Jews and the body of the Gentile people, even though it was sown in sin, they were dead in sin because they were sown in sin. Now that body is being raised by the Spirit. The Spirit is raising that body to life, and they come together in one body, both Jew and Gentile, in one body, into one new man. That's the body of Christ. So he says in verse 44, he says it, not they. It is sown a natural body, singular. It is singular, body is singular. It's a corporate body that he's referencing, not individual fleshly bodies. It is raised a spiritual body. Now notice, there is a natural body and there is a spiritual body. Okay, Israel, under the Old Covenant law, they were a natural body. This word in the Greek is psychikos, and that means natural, fleshly. Lost my page. Psychikos. All right. This is how they existed under the law. They existed in the flesh because they were following laws of fleshly commandments, which could never take away sin. Notice what he says. Verse 44. The second part of verse 44. There is a natural body. That's the old covenant body. There is a spiritual body. That's the new covenant body. He's contrasting flesh and spirit here. He's contrasting the two covenants. Your existence as a Jew under the old covenant was a fleshly existence in that sukkikos body, the body of the flesh. Your existence in the new covenant is a pneumatikos. You've heard the word pneuma, pneumatic power tools. That means air, spirit, breath. So this word spiritual is pneumatikos. Pneuma, the spirit, the breath. So you're contrasting the sukkikos, the natural, the old covenant body, to the pneumatikos, the new covenant body, which is spiritual. That's why you have these words here. Now watch. Verse 45, and so it is written, quote, the first man Adam, is the first man Adam the sukkikos man of the flesh? Yes. Became a living being. The last Adam became what? A life-giving spirit. Pneumatikos. Pneuma. Spirit is pneuma in the Greek. He's contrasting the two covenants. One existed under the flesh, the other existed in the spirit. Adam was a sukkikos man. He was a natural man, a man of the flesh. Jesus is notice the last Adam, which is Jesus, became a life-giving spirit. However, look at verse 46. Here's my secret weapon. The spiritual is not first. Now let's just slow down and digest this for a moment. The spiritual is not first, but the natural, and afterward the spiritual.
Makes sense.
Okay, so here is the template to follow. You have the first man, Adam. He's not a spiritual man. He's a man of the flesh. Okay? But you have the second Adam, because Adam was a type of Christ. You have the second man, Adam, who now exists in the spirit, and thus you have the contrast of covenants and the contrast of the bodies. You have the old covenant body that existed in the flesh. You have the new covenant body that's the man of the spirit. But he says in verse 46, the spirit is not first. It's not first.
It can't be.
The natural man is first. Then the spiritual. I said, okay, so if Paul sets forth the template, he says the natural is first. We know the natural is the fleshly. John 1:14, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, right? Okay. Jesus first, when he was manifested in the flesh. He was, some say the God-man. I wouldn't deny that. He was man and he was God in the flesh, right? So, I just don't like the term because it's not actually a biblical term. But to say that Jesus came in the flesh, okay, I'm good with that because that's
He did.
John 1:14. That's 1 John also. He came in the flesh. He was manifested in the flesh. So he had a nature just like you and I have the fleshly nature today. That was his first manifestation. That was his first coming. That follows the template of 1 Corinthians 15:46. Now watch where I'm going. What comes after the physical manifestation? The spiritual manifestation. So when Jesus returned the second time,
Spiritual.
would he come in the physical manifestation or the spiritual manifestation?
Spiritual.
Spiritual. Paul says that the natural's first, then the spiritual. So what does that mean about the second coming? He came in the clouds, you couldn't see him. But because the clouds of judgment was there at the destruction of Jerusalem, it's Jewish judgment language. God always comes in the cloud, but the cloud, he's shrouded in the cloud, Just like on Sinai, the cloud came down, they saw the cloud, thunder, lightning, rumbling, smoke, and fire, and they knew God's presence was there because the cloud was there. Now they couldn't see him because the cloud shrouded the presence of God. So when the New Testament says he's coming in the clouds and every eye shall see him, they're not seeing a physical body. They're seeing the spiritual manifestation in the clouds of judgment as he's shrouded in the cloud. And yet we know his presence is there because we see the clouds of judgment there. That's the idea. So the idea of him coming in the clouds is a Jewish concept. So Paul gives us the template that the natural, fleshly is first, the spiritual, the pneumatikos part is second. The second coming was a spiritual manifestation. It wasn't a physical manifestation. So that's what I explained to him. And and then he would say, okay, and then he would ask another question, and we would go on. And that went on for an hour and 37 minutes, and then he had to go, which was fine, because I had to go at that time. So look, we win some and we lose some, okay? And I want to be positive. I want to be gracious. I want to extend grace and kindness to everyone that we can. And so, some of the brothers got a little bit upset, and I said, look, don't get upset. All we can do is plant the seed, water the seed. Who is it that gives the increase? God. God gives the increase.
He's going to think about this.
Yeah. So I said, they've got the material. Let it come what may. Whatever happens, we have at least 7 people in Fresno. And now they're wanting a gospel meeting. So we'll see what happens next year with them. So we made some good contacts, and I'm happy. I'm happy. I hope you guys are happy. And that's kind of what's going on. So there's a little bit of drama. So if they're talking about us in Woodlake, then I know because Woodlake, they have people that go to Woodlake, they go to Visalia and Tulare. Guess what? Boom. Boom over there, that's okay.
It's okay.
That's all right.
It's good to talk.
Yeah.
It's good to perk interest.
Well, hopefully they'll come watch the YouTube channel and get educated, right?
Yeah, I
'Cause-
hope they do.
And they
I
can,
hope so.
they can argue with the Bible and their worldview that is based on a futurist misinterpretation of what the text actually says.
Yes. And I want us to be kind and courteous to them, and give them some time to digest these new concepts, because we all need time. So not to be disparaging toward them, I just wanted to kind of catch you up as to what was going on. So in gospel meetings, they always do this. There's always a little bit of a buzz, no matter what topic you talk about. There is going to be that, and so it's really quite normal. It really is a normal thing. So it's nothing out of the ordinary. So, all right. Any other comments or questions? Okay. Thank you.